This is the first time in my life I've ever done anything like this. This is all 100% Stipe's idea. I was here in November. Jasmina said, come to this secret dinner in Baranja. I promise it will be something special. I didn't realise I almost went swimming naked in the lake at 3 o'clock in the morning and got to bed at 6. We had a fantastic time. And the idea of me standing up in front of everybody telling stories about my life and people actually paying to come and listen to that was absolutely insane as a concept. And yet, here you are. So I'm sure that Steve has paid you to come and stuff, so I'm not going to ask about things. I'm a fat Brit that was born in Manchester, moved to the sunniest island in Croatia, Hvar, via Somaliland. I've been here since 2003 full time. And I have no idea how this evening will go. I'm very, very happy to answer questions about my life in Croatia, because people seem to be interested in what it's like as a foreigner to live in this beautiful country, which is the best country in the world. And you, with your negative mindsets, we will persuade you over a glass of wine why this is the best country in the world. And also, I have this book called Around the World in. There we go. Around the World in 80 Disasters, which I'll tell a few stories from tonight. This book has been 15 years in the writing. Before I came to Croatia in 2002, I'd lived in 9 different countries and I visited 95 countries, and I didn't have a plan about anything. And so I was in plane crashes, got arrested, I was guns to my head, a bunch of things happened. And I realised that there was enough material in my life to write this book, Around the World in 80 Disasters, which I finally finished after 15 years in October last year. And so I'm going to tell over tonight a few stories from my disasters, and I'm going to tell you my most embarrassing story, my most dangerous story, and my scariest story. And as you drink wine tonight, which is all on the house included apparently, so drink a lot of it, because Steve has apparently 300 bottles in the basement that need emptying. As you drink, maybe you think I have a story to tell. And when I finish telling my stories, I can talk all night if you want me to, no problem. Maybe you say, I'd like to tell a story. Maybe somebody comes up here and tells their story, and then somebody else does, and suddenly we have an incredible evening of participation, great fun, and maybe some interesting stories that have nothing to do with me, and then the evening is a great success, and then we all go swimming naked in the lake at 3 o'clock or later. So before, just now, I would like to not tell you about disasters. I would like to start by answering 2 questions which I get asked the most in Croatia. I've already been asked one of these questions already tonight, and I'm going to answer these questions. And the 2 questions are, why are you here? And because I'm from Manchester, City or United? Those are the 2 questions I get asked so much. And so I'm going to answer those 2 questions now, and then I'll hand it back to Steve, who's then running the show tonight, and he'll decide what happens next. So the reason I'm here is, back in 2002, I was a humanitarian aid worker in Somaliland in East Africa, in Hargeisa, and I just sold my house in the UK, just got divorced from my first wife, and I had this money in my bank account, and I was sitting on the terrace. It was a beautiful sunset. I had a gin and tonic, illegal gin and tonic, I had a gin and tonic, and I was sharing a house with 8 Africans from Sudan, from Ethiopia, from Kenya, and so on, great guys. And I was the only white guy, pink guy. And I just got this money in my bank account, and I was suddenly free from the first disaster of marriage. And I decided I wanted to buy a house somewhere in Europe that was not the UK, somewhere in Europe that was close to the sea, somewhere that I could put my books, have a little base, because I was going to be an aid worker forever. I'd already got a job in Baghdad, was coming up, and I just thought, where will I buy my house in Europe? And I finished my gin and tonic, which happens. I went downstairs to get another gin and tonic. The African colleagues were playing Scrabble, CNN was on the TV, and then there was a reclama, 30 seconds of magic, Croatia, the Mediterranean as it once was. And I watched that, and I looked around Somalia, and I'm like, what the fuck am I doing here? And this was an advert from the Croatian National Tourist Board, who I have to congratulate because their niche targeting of fat pink Englishmen in northern Somalia was really a massive hit. 20 years later,
They got you here.
they're the reason I'm here. 20 years later, I was the only blogger or journalist in the whole year that was sued by the Croatian National Tourist Board twice, and they lost twice. And this was the best PR I've ever had. So my thanks and congratulations to the Croatian National Tourist Board for really changing my life in both ways. And this was a lovely souvenir I got after the event, my Croatia Football Club's t-shirt. And so I saw this advert, and I'm thinking, what a beautiful place Croatia looks like. I'd been to Dubrovnik for 2 days, travelling through. I'd been to Zagreb overnight and Medjugorje in 1987, because I was at a boarding school with Jesuits, priests, and Medjugorje was the whole thing. I went to see the whole miracle, and I left a bit disappointed, to be honest. So I thought Croatia. So I had a friend, she was Canadian, and she lived in Sarajevo. And she was an aid worker, and she was there during the war. During the siege, she would be in South Sarajevo. Every weekend, she would come out and go to the Croatian coast. And she said to me, come to Sarajevo in August 2002, and I will explain a few things about Croatia, where to buy. I'll make a list, and then my Bosnian boyfriend, we have a weekend away. We'll leave early Friday morning. We'll have the whole weekend, and on Monday morning we'll come back to Sarajevo, and if we can find you a house, that would be amazing. I said, perfect. So I flew to Sarajevo in 2002, and we were out drinking, as we do, and she was explaining a few things. She got a pen and paper. She wrote down 10 places that she thought would be interesting for me to go and buy a house. And Broj 1 was Dubrovnik, the Pearl of the Adriatic. Number 2 was Split, Diocletian's Palace, UNESCO World Heritage Site. And you know when you're asking for directions when you're lost, when you're driving your car, and people explain to you, you need to do this, you stop listening. At least I did. I just stopped listening. The girls were really pretty in Sarajevo, and the beer was flowing, and I completely stopped listening. And then number 10 was the island of Vis, this former military place, blah, blah, blah. And she said, which is the place out of the 10 that you think would be the best? And I felt so embarrassed that I'd not been actually listening, that I closed my eyes and I put my finger down on a piece of paper, Broj 6 Hvar. And she said, that's an interesting choice. You know it's an island. And I'd never heard of it. But I said, it must be beautiful because it's on your list, so let's go and buy there. So we left at 3 o'clock in the morning on the Friday. It was Spitzsaison, the peak season. And we drove through Jadlanica. We had the Janitina at 4:30 in the morning. And then we got to Drvenik. We took the ferry to Suceava. And her boyfriend, Amko, was a typical Bosnian who just never spoke. Never spoke. Drove. And then we had a coffee in Suceava, or I had a beer, and he looked at me and he said, the longest conversation I ever had with this guy. He's like, znaš šta? Po mojem mišljenju, takes his espresso cup. Najbolje mjesto na Hvaru. To je Jelsa. And that was the end of the conversation. That was the longest conversation I ever had with them. And I'm like, well, fuck it, let's go buy Jelsa. So we drove through, I don't know if you've ever driven through eastern Hvar, but I wouldn't say the word Bukojevina on camera, but it's a very, very depopulated area. And I'm like, what the hell is this place? Because there was just empty village after empty village after empty village after empty. And then it was Velegospor, it was August 15th, we came to Jelsa. It was Ferragosto, all the Italians were in. And I was like, this place is incredible. And I'm like, wow, I could actually live here, this is amazing. So we looked at Bosco, we started going to Hvar, and I'm like, Jelsa. So Amco, go and have a pizza with my girlfriend and I will see what's for sale. And there was only one thing for sale. And so I was told to come back the next day at 6 o'clock by the catamaran. There'd be an old guy wearing a straw hat who spoke German, and he was the owner. And so he came back and he walked us through the romantic old town. I'm looking at these big castles going, maybe it's that one, and maybe it's that one. It was 41,000 euros was the price, and I was like, what can you buy for 41,000 euros in Hvar in 2000? And I was like, and then we went to the left and there was this tiny little house. And I was like, let's go buy it. So we found a lawyer in his Adidas shell suit on a Sunday. We had a one-page pre-contract. Cigarette ash went onto the pre-contract. We went to the bank the next day to get a 2,000 euro capita, and then we went back to Sarajevo, and I bought this house in Jelsa. And all my friends back in the UK were like, what the hell have you done? You're a war zone junkie, you were in Rwanda, you've been in thinking that, because Croatia had just had the war, it was 95 it finished, this was 2002. And I'm like, no, this place is pretty nice. And so some friends were so concerned that they drove from the UK and took me down to make sure everything was okay, that I got a proper signature, I got a stamp, I got something. And they stayed with me camping for a week while I did the final contract. And in September 11th, I signed the final contract, got the keys, moved in, and I went down to the piazza to celebrate with a beer, as British people do when they buy a house in a foreign country. And I looked around and I thought, where the fuck is everyone? Because I'd last been there in the middle of August, and now I was in the middle of September, and it just seemed so much quieter. And then I realised that the internet cafe was open all day in the middle of August, and now it was open from 7 till 10, and then 5 till 10, and then the next week it was open from 8 till 9, and the next week it was closed. And I thought, what a strange place that's like really, really vibrant, and then really closed. And then it really sort of hit me in the 1st of October. I used to go to the same restaurant every night, Conover Forest, it was in the old town, fantastic place, great food. And on the 1st of October I went there, and it was closed. And I thought, oh, that's a bit inconvenient. And then the next day I saw the waiter on the piazza having a coffee, and I'm like, hey man, you were closed last night? He said, yeah. I said, when are you opening again? He said, May. I said, May? what kind of restaurant is closed for 7 months of the year? And then it slowly dawned on me that it wasn't Ferragosto every day, 12 months a year. And I thought, what the hell have I done? And then it got a bit colder, and in October, and I was like, let's turn the heating on. And I went to look for the central heating, and there wasn't. It was a holiday house, and I was like, wow. And then there was a septic tank, and I was like, which for us Brits is a bit kind of strange. And I'm like, and then I realised I didn't actually have an address. There was no road sign, road name, there was no number. So I went to the post office with my contract, and I said, can you tell me what my address is, please? Sorry, it's a stupid question. And they looked at the contract, and the guy started laughing at me, and he said, did you really buy this house? And I said, maybe. And he said, from Pantagam. And I was like, what's Pantagam? And he said, oh, how you say, not mouse, rat. And Pantagam is a dialect word for rat in Dalmatian. So I bought this house apparently from a guy called Mr. Rat. And then he said, are you going to live here all year? And I said, yeah. And the whole, there were 5 of them that just started laughing at me. And I was like, what happens in winter? And I was really, really terrified. And so I got home and I'm like, I've really, really messed up here. And so I went home and I thought, I have to learn Croatian. I have to learn Croatian because if I don't, because there's all the tourists have gone, and it's just, will the supermarket be open in December? It was really like that. And so I went to the library. I spoke Russian before. I lived in Russia, so I spoke quite fluent Russian, so I knew all the padazhi and all that stuff. So I just thought I'll get a children's book and I'll start learning Croatian through that. So I went into the library, opened the door, and there in front of me, with Oči ka more, was my future wife.
Oh.
Yeah. We've just got divorced, but for 20 years it was a great love. And she's a wonderful, wonderful woman. She really is, and I'm really happy that we're good friends now and stuff. But yeah, so that's how I came to Croatia. And the second question is a much quicker story. City or United. People are obsessed with football in this country. And when I come from Manchester, it's like, are you a Manchester City fan, Manchester United fan? And I'm not that big on football, to be honest, but...
United.
City.
You said that without opening it.
If you think
I'm
a United fan, put your hand up. Okay? If you think I'm a City fan, put your hand up. If you think I'm a fan of somebody else, put your hand up. Smart people tonight. When I was 6 years old, my father is from Birmingham, and he was a season ticket holder at Aston Villa from the age of 12. Never missed a game. And he took me to a game when I was 6 years old, and he said, "Son, I need you to make me one promise." And I said, "Anything, Dad," because I want to adore your dad and stuff. And he said, "I want you to be an Aston Villa fan for all your life." And I said, "Whatever it takes, Dad, if that's what's required, you know." So I made this commitment to him, and this was great when I was 12 because we were the champions. We've done nothing for 43 years since, and it's been an absolute pain. And I have to go through this conversation probably about 2 times a day in Croatia, City or United. So that's the story. So those are the 2 reasons why the most common questions I'm asked in Croatia. I can shut up now and do whatever. You tell me what happens next.
Yeah, thanks. And we should get to the food if it's not a problem. So, for starters,
tell us more stories.
we shall continue. So we just
starters and then
yeah. So we fill everything. So he continues.